Oi, oi, all right, all right. How's it going? I'm Grant, you're you. This is the Doodle Review. We're coming through with another episode of Sound Bites. It's a series where we speed run through a bunch of albums. Today's edition is Underground Entrees. We're covering CRX, Gum, and Ambrose Kenny Smith, Hiatus Kaiyote. We're going to be talking a little bit about Fu Manchu. We're going to be also talking about Of Montreal. We're going to talk about Drala. We're going to talk about Mount Kimbie. There's loads, Vile. We're also going to talk about Fax Gang and Paranol. And finally, we're going to top it off with Bean Stella. This is Nick Valenci of The Strokes. His little side band is bit on the side away from the often tense and volatile money spinner that is his day job in the band that started an indie rock revolution in the early 2000s, The Strokes. There are a plethora of projects and bands related to The Strokes. They run the absolute gamut of being deeply artistic, heavy, and weird experiences like The Voids to kind of throw away bar band dross. Sorry, Summer Moon. CRX, in particular, the first album, straddled the intersection between being familiar fun while also being genuinely interesting. That album, that first one, was produced by Josh Homme and oozed 80s cars-like power pop. Yes, the lyrics were bad. I think even ChatGPT could write with fewer contrivances than old Nick in those early days, but the riffs were slick and glossy with songs that had the kind of neon retro flair you associate with the glorious Honda hatchback from which the project took its name. Their second record, Peak, kind of lost me. It seemed to really pull back from the fun, glam power pop of that first one and went headlong into a darker, kind of electronic based new wave. I've actually revisited it and it's definitely a grower. It just didn't quite charm me in the way that the first one did. So this new EP, Interiors, is a great indicator, hopefully, of where the band's going to go next. Because for me, it's really a merging of those two personalities from each record: the instantaneous fun of New Skin with the weird, brooding new wave of Peak. Mean to Be Cold kicks things off with a tight, punchy groove, spidery riff, and the kind of simple vocal melody on the chorus that makes it irresistible to sing along with, seeding a proper earworm in your brain after just a couple of listens. Fate scales things back a little bit. The groove is more subdued and backed with some very 80s synth based tones, but the awesome call and response type backing vocals give you a great hook to latch onto as the white boy funk kind of does its thing underneath. Walk With Me is a track that gets a bit tedious and its riff might have been better used as like more of an interlude or a detour off a stronger song with more to say. It kind of reminds me of King Gizzard in how kitschy and mercurial it is. I do like the descending riffs that break the thing up though, and there are some cool solos. All in all, this is a really fun EP, and now I'm really excited for hopefully a full album return from this project. It's great. Gum is the solo project of Jay Watson, founding member of the Australian psych band Pond and longtime collaborator and touring member of Tame Impala. And on Ill Times, he's linking up with fellow Aussie Ambrose Kenny Smith, longtime member of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. I've tried Pond before and didn't really get on with them. King Gizzard, I love, but you also never know what you're going to get. So putting this record on, I just had no idea what to expect. Almost immediately, though, I was won over. This is like a blend of yacht rock. It's got psychedelia and pop. It's lightly funky. It's light-hearted and totally catchy. It occasionally gets like a little twee and kitschy, like the overly bouncy major key number Old Transistor Radio. But for the most part, the combo of Watson's deep in the pocket grooves and Smith's knack for a funky hook completely charms me, even if it feels mostly unserious. The title track, Minor Setback, and Power Tripping are my favorites. This one is also great. There is a lot of love out there in the world for the band's second record, I think, called Choose Your Weapon. And I've seen many times Fantano get taken to task for apparently like vastly underrating that album. I'll hold my hands up and say I actually never got around to listening to it, but the buzz was enough that I was sure to jump on Mood Valiant, their next one, when it dropped in 2021. What I found was a band unquestionably in command of the fabled pocket. The bass, drums, and keys are so attuned to each other, they couldn't be any deeper in that damn pocket if they tried. They're so deep in that fucker, it would make the struggle of finding your keys after a night out seem like a breeze in comparison to finding Hiatus Kaiyote in there. The record reminded me of Voodoo era D'Angelo, where all of the instruments were super fluid, constantly morphing and changing. But as enjoyable as these sounds were, sometimes this fluidity seemed to work against it. On Mood Valiant, I felt sometimes a reliance on hooks that were implied rather than ones that were solidly present. I think Love Heart Cheat Code actually addresses that quite well. Tracks like Telescope and Make Friends have a distinct hook, melody, and riff, all without losing any of that beautiful fluidity or being any less in the pocket. The band often incorporate kind of funny, kind of quirky lyrical themes or even melodic templates, and these can go either way for me. The title track, with its very simplistic descending Love Hard Cheat Code, works well, but I find stuff like Long Cat just gets a little old. Occasionally, I find the crazy syncopated rhythmic change ups a little invasive, a bit annoying, frankly, but on the whole, I really like what these guys are doing. Cinnamon Temple introduces some kind of experimentation with a grittier, harsher sound, and I'd love to hear the band mix it up more with this type of stuff on future endeavors. I'm going to say this one's decent. So I'm a big desert rock guy. Long-time viewers will know of my fondness for Queens of the Stone Age. So of course I was also a big Kyuss guy, and I enjoy Yawning Man and Fatso Jetson and all of that sort of stuff. The thing is, though, there is also a bunch of desert or stoner stuff that I just find pretty boring. And anytime I've tried to get into Fu Manchu, that's been my experience. Maybe I'm trying the wrong stuff, but certainly it's true of this album. It's just a lot of kind of boring blues based riffs with big swinging drums. It's a sound that's inherently badass, and I'm always down to hear a band rattle through some of these tunes, in a live setting. But on record, it's just a bit blah, a bit humdrum. My favorite on this album is far and away the last track, High Tide, with a very chilled out vibe and a killer bass line. It's one of the only tracks here that just sounds interesting to me. So to me, this is painfully mid, but I can totally understand anyone that likes it. It's just not really doing it for me. Fu Manchu fans, sound off in the comments maybe with what album I should try. Confused endlessly with other bands, whether it's Wilco, My Morning Jacket, or Modest Mouse. They all blur together for me for some reason, and this is one of those in the mix. It's the new Of Montreal and their album Lady on the Cusp. Anyone that's a fan of all of those artists will be like, what are you on about? Those bands I just mentioned, they sound nothing like each other. To that I say, chill. These bands blur together for me for no other reason than they all have weird names that mean nothing and all somewhat came out of a similar era. I clearly had no idea what to expect with Off Montreal because my very first note under the very first song just says, what the fuck is this? Though I always knew that the bands I was confusing and mixing up would sound differently, I have to say I still expected Of Montreal to fit somewhere within the wheelhouse of American 90s indie, being centered around the guitar. Maybe that was true of previous Montreal records, but certainly not this one. Perhaps I'm just jumping into the catalogue at, a very strange period. But having now done the classic, Wikipedia deep dive, I'm not convinced I have. I'm not sure if I love the album, but I do love how much it knocked me off center. It's rare these days to be completely taken by surprise and hear something totally off the wall. As an example, the song Piss Piss starts with these weird descending atonal jazz chords, and it drops into some kind of Bowie-esque new wave funk. Halfway through, though, it then drops into some kind of abstract noise ambient soundtrack. Many of the songs here follow that kind of pattern, starting as one thing and then slowly morphing into this other, more abstracted version of itself. It leaves you genuinely in a position where you don't know what to expect. I have to say, although I've been really entranced by the album's weirdness, I do find myself gravitating towards the more traditionally structured tracks. Like Rude Girl on Rotation has a guitar part that's just easy to follow and feels very hippy dippy in a kind of indie way. Reminds me a little of Sparkle Horse. Poetry Surf starts with all of these disparate elements but comes together into a strong punchy groove interspersed with cool guitar lines, and those are easy to get. I kind of don't really know how to rate this one. I'm going to hedge my bets and say decent for now. I think I'm still a little bit overwhelmed to know whether I'm responding favorably to the songs or just by being surprised, but there's definitely stuff I enjoy and I can't wait to hear more of Montreal and go back through their catalog some more. to get a little bit perspective on their whole vibe. Now, apparently, coming out of a period of great change for the band, which they write about with profound reverence on their Bandcamp page, Angel Tape is a darkly angular experience, written clearly with a lot of intent, but ultimately just gets quite monotonous over the course of the entire record. There's a house style here of very scratchy angular guitars and set against bass guitars that have a almost sort of surf rock clip tone. It comes together a few times to make some genuinely interesting tracks. Lip Sync has one of my favorite riffs on the record, while like the rest of the album, it overdoes it a little bit on the scratchy thing. There are enough other things happening with the drums and the polyrhythms to kind of keep it interesting. Zigzag starts with the guitars kind of batting a riff to each other across the stereo image in a way that recalls ping pong. And this is really cool until it stops being cool. But when the band, full band come in, the song starts to really work well. The bands are great at driving things forward. And when it's purposeful and has a clear point, it works. This track has distinct parts that all interlock and satisfy, which, is quite cool. A lot of the other tracks, though, they hit the distinct driving groove, but almost just it lacks purpose. There's an intensity to Drala I really like. They've clearly got motive, but Angel Tape just doesn't seem to have a destination. It's mid for me, but it would be cool to see what they do next. When I was listening to this, I kind of wondered if this whole sound is like a bit done now, like this weird overdriven spring reverb guitar against minimalist electronica and melancholy piano. I don't know if I'm describing it right, but there is a certain color palette and texture that I associate with Mount Kimbie, but also King Cruel, Nilüfer, J-Som, and Muramasa. It was amazing in its peak of like 2017 to 21, but now listening to the Sunset Violent, I can't shake the feeling it's a little bit played out. And while that thought was kind of floating around my head, I have to admit I was still actually enjoying quite a few of the songs on this record. The Trail is a really great opening. I love that chord progression and the warbly synths over the top with bass guitar that's picking out unusual notes from the chord that really stand out. Dumb Guitar is a slow burn that pulls together a really subdued piano sound, a snaky bass tone, and filtered guitars until a chorus emerges. It's willfully subdued, but still somehow cathartic. Figure in the Surf is probably my favorite tune here, with a fun groove that has these little guitar riffs signaling the turnaround of the progression and satisfying blasts of synth pads. It's got a killer palm muted breakdown that could have come off one of Foles's better records, I would say. Sunset Violent dithers towards the end. I find Yucca Tree hypnotic but not particularly interesting, and Fishbrain is meandering and doesn't really feel like it goes anywhere. As I said, this aesthetic overall feels a little worn out, but this is still a top tier example of it. I'm going to give this one a great. This is one for fans of Mannequin Pussy and Charlie Bliss. It's lightweight and airy pop punk that sways between the grittier, harder end of the spectrum and the soft, almost dream pop side of things. There's a dry, witty sarcasm to the lyrics, which is funny and charming and adds a vital extra dimension to this album that otherwise delivers fairly standard indie-tinged pop punk. Falling Short is fast, tight, and undeniably catchy, especially when it soars in its final moments of I don't care anymore. Just Fine is another favorite, a punchy but mellow track that is an ode to that side of depression where being just fine is the high watermark and a feeling to strive for. The album ends with the track called Apathy, and true to its name is very flat, but while thematically on point, it seems like a weird way to end the album. I'm going to say this one's decent. Another one I tried completely on a whim. I'd never heard of either artist, Fax Gang or Paranol, but I just couldn't get enough of that name, Fax Gang. That is sick. Such a great name with an intriguing album cover. Obviously, I had to give it a try. Scattersun is a huge collaborative effort. Fax Gang themselves are an online collective that combines 4 producers from 4 different continents who met online in the forums of Rate Your Music. They make explosive, bit-crushed electronica combined with cloud rap, with touches of hyperpop and any other kind of postmodern genre you can think of, while Paranol is a South Korean shoegaze artist. Based on that description alone, you can probably tell the music on this thing is pretty out there. I would say try this if you like the abrasive unpredictability of JPEG Mafia and some of the dissonant campy pop of AG Cook. If that turns you off though, or you have no idea what I'm talking about, proceed with some caution. For me, this level of experimentation and forced, genre collisions and bleeding edge production really excites me. In many ways, it feels like it fulfills the promise of our post-internet music and what it should be, bringing tons of elements together regardless of genre boundaries and just getting really weird with it. So as a concept, I love it, but what about in practice? Well, there are great moments scattered throughout. I really like the crunchy break beats of Double Bind and the swirling synths that feel like you're in the middle of a hurricane. And I love the PS1, PS2 racing game aesthetic of Soliloquy, which is something I also enjoyed on the recent Salute record. Lullaby for a Memory is a standout for me with its delicate piano melody leading us into an epic piece with emotive vocals and huge blown out drums. The album trails off after these tracks, though, with some really long and winding songs that don't offer a lot to grab onto. And despite the promise of involvement from a shoegaze artist like Paranor, I feel like his contribution gets kind of lost in the mix. It's almost similar to Of Montreal in the sense that being bowled over by the experimentation makes it harder to tell if you actually like it. But I think on the whole, I find this more memorable, and there are definitely a few more tracks by name I can see myself going back to. I'm going to give this one a great. There seems to be a bit of a post-COVID renaissance for bands in New York with a lot of indie-centric groups coming up. One of them is Bean Stella, who have been snapped up by Dirty Hit, Matty Healy's, the guy from 1975's record label. I'm going to keep this particular review short and sweet. I don't like to diminish any new and up and coming artists' work. What they've made is certainly better than anything I can do. But while this album is perfectly competent, it is completely and utterly derivative. These guys just want to be Ice Age so badly. And yeah, it occasionally comes together into a few hummable tracks like Pumpkin or the title track, but there's not an original thought here. And for that, I'm going to say it's bad. I wish them the best. I'm sure I'll be eating my words in a few years when they turn out to be massive. But right now, this album just does nothing for me. All right, that's 10 albums, so it's definitely time to knock it on the head. All of this is obviously just what I reckon. So tell me what you're saying. Hit me up in the comments and let me know if you've heard any of these. I've also put some links to some other reviews that you might like in the description. And if you can be asked to do all that, then stick around. Subscribe, share some thoughts, show some love, or just hail some abuse in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video. All right, mate, take care. Mine, there you go. Cheers then. Bye.